Hello and welcome to the Cracking the Doctor Code course. I'm Dr. Vicki Reckner, the president of Targeting Doctors. The purpose of this course is simple. It's to help you get results by acquiring more doctor clients. Here are the goals for today's session. The first goal is to place healthcare reform in a historic context. Second, it's to introduce ourselves. And third, it's to generate ideas about how to leverage the remaining 6 weeks of 2012 and our current tax rates. If I may, I'd like to begin with my story. How did I come to help financial advisors acquire physician clients? If my life had a bumper sticker, it would read, "Heal Thyself." I faced challenges, figured out how to deal with it, and then helped others along the path. Now, I didn't always know that I wanted to be a doctor. I was in my early 20s in a PhD program when suddenly one night I fainted on my way to the bathroom. An ovarian cyst had ruptured over a blood vessel, and by the time I got to the operating room, almost half of my blood volume was in my pelvis. When I said my goodbye to my then fiance, I thought it was the final goodbye. I was delighted to wake up in the recovery room and realize that I was alive. I made it. The very next thought was, I'm going to be a doctor and save the lives of other people like my own had been saved. Not surprisingly, I became a surgeon and set up my own private practice. After I had established myself, it was time to start our family. When I was 40 years old, I was blessed and conceived a son by in vitro fertilization. I had my own office. I had side-by-side exam rooms and a procedure room. My plan was to convert one of the exam rooms to the nursery and have my office manager take care of my son when I was off operating. I conveniently ignored comments that came my way. Oh, he's not rolling over yet? Oh, he's not sitting up? Well, what finally burst through the denial was probably related to my commitment to helping patients find their voice. I noticed that he wasn't talking. I brought my son in for a developmental assessment, and I remember the Tuesday morning that Jerry told me the results. She said, "Vicki, you have a delightful son. He's engaged, he's cheerful, and problem solving is his main asset." Now, she said, "You've already noticed the delay in his language, but what you might not know is that he's delayed in all areas that we measured, and we're going to recommend that he be enrolled in our special school to achieve his developmental landmarks." Well, this school was a state-funded school for kids up to 4 years old who had the most profound disabilities. I took a leave from my practice and dedicated myself to being a full-time mother. The harder I worked to fix my son, the more stuck we got. It was like trying to get my car out of a snowbank. I decided that there must be another way, and I was going to find it. That other way was giving up this idea of my perfect son. I was going to accept my son for whomever he was and help him be the very best version of himself. I learned sign language. I started celebrating the other kids who were in my son's class. After a year in the school, my son was retested and he met all his developmental landmarks. He has a wonderful brain that's just maturing on its own schedule. My son just turned 15. He's completely mainstreamed, and there would be no way that you would ever guess about our rocky start. Well, by the time the story was over, I had been away from my practice for about a year. I had generated revenue by being an expert in medical malpractice lawsuits, and I saw some of the nightmares in medicine. What was I going to do next? I wanted to avoid these bad outcomes. What I knew from my own personal experience were that doctors and patients and family caregivers were like members of a choir, and they were all singing different songs without even knowing it. What I wanted to do was help people sing the same song at the same time. So in 2000, I launched my business, Medical Bridges. I never realized the challenges involved in running a business, and acquiring these business skills was a full-time effort for me. I made many, many mistakes. I learned lots of lessons the hard way. But I kept on going. I'm humbled to see the opportunities that I've had. I've had the honor of writing a number of books. of being quoted in national publications, of being interviewed on over 100 radio shows, and of getting in front of literally millions of people. How did I start working with financial advisors? A few years ago, I got a Christmas card from a former medical school classmate. She'd set up a private practice and was describing the challenges she was facing. Her uninsured patients weren't coming in, and she was dipping into her retirement savings to fund her payroll. I heard more and more of these stories. I suspected that many physicians had the same lack of financial literacy that I did. If I could only get physicians and financial advisors hooked up, your physician clients are going to be facing another devastating blow, and that's healthcare reform. To give you a sense of why I say this, let me frame this conversation in a historic context by sharing the stories of 4 generations of surgeons in my family. When I was a little girl, I met my distant cousin Sammy. He was born in 1901. He was a physician who married his nurse. They lived in a beautiful old house on a tree-lined street in Minneapolis where they both lived and saw patients. My cousin decided how much he would charge his patients, who would then pay out of pocket. When they didn't have money, they would pay with a chicken or maybe a few hours of snow shoveling. He described the wonders of the Blue Revolution, Blue Cross and Blue Shield. The insurance companies were his heroes. Suddenly, patients wouldn't have to worry about their financial security if somebody got sick. The next generation, my uncle's generation, was trained when JFK was president. They, like the previous generation, expected to go into private practice. They, too, set their own fees, but they sent their bills to the insurance company. I went to medical school in the 80s. I, too, expected to follow in the footsteps of the previous generations, and when I finished my residency, I did join a medical group. Shortly thereafter, I broke off on my own. Like the previous generations, I set my own fees and submitted my fees to the insurance company, who paid. There was a conspiracy of secrecy about money. I remember one time I asked one of my mentors how much I should charge for an appendectomy if the appendix was ruptured. He just looked at me and he said, "Vicki, you can't ask me that question. If I answered, I'd be in violation of antitrust laws." Well, it wasn't just fee setting. I didn't know how much medication costs. I had a patient who needed an antibiotic that had a very unpleasant side effect. I had just been visited by a pharmaceutical sales rep who told me about this great new antibiotic that avoided the problem. My patient later came back to me and said, "Do you know how much this antibiotic costs?" 10 times as much. Well, I was clueless. Not surprisingly, when physicians are not aware of the price tag of the products and services they prescribe, costs soar out of control, which is what happened. Insurance companies responded with the system they called managed care. Instead of doctors submitting bills to insurance companies would now tell doctors how much they would get paid. One of my colleagues says, "It's like we have a clown with us in the operating room." Essentially, during the 90s, physicians lost control of the financial helm of the healthcare system. The insurance companies were in charge, and not only were they deciding how much we would get paid, they rated us based on our cost effectiveness. I remember one morning I was rounding on a patient. I had removed her spleen, and she really needed to be in the hospital for another day. But I knew that if I kept her in the hospital another day, that would reflect poorly on my cost-effective score. And I found that horrifying. I should have been dedicated to the patient and not worried about how that would reflect on me. As managed care unfolded, my hospital invited all of the physicians to a meeting. They explained to us that they, as a huge group, would be in a better negotiating position with the insurance company. And they asked us to consider selling our practices to them. Well, many physicians did. Many physicians were unhappy. You couldn't buy a disability policy in the 90s because so many physicians were leaving their practice on disability leave. Physicians learned that the AMA wasn't really in their corner. The hospitals and clinics weren't really in their corner. In fact, there was really nobody looking out for the private physician in private practice. My niece graduated from medical school and just started her pediatric residency. She is expecting a much different life than I did. She knows that she will be an employee. She expects that she will have a life. She knows that she'll make a comfortable wage, but nothing spectacular, not like the previous generations. So her expectations are different and her reality will be different. We do not know what the reformed healthcare system will look like, but some speculate that medical fees could decrease as much as 40%. What this means is that if doctors want to maintain their level of income and their lifestyle, they will need advice from smart, business-savvy people. I believe that the changes we are about to face will make the changes of managed care look like just a little blip. What can you do? Think of the last airplane ride that you were on when you faced turbulence. Didn't you feel better when the pilot came on ahead of time and said, "We're expecting some bumpy travel ahead. Stay in your seat and keep your seatbelt on. We'll keep you posted." Knowledge is power. You can offer this leadership, anticipating the changes that are ahead. Consider how you'll use these last 6 weeks of 2012. Remember, physicians have 2 strikes against them. First, they have high net worth, so they need to worry about what the new tax codes mean for them. How about contacting your clients and prospects and giving them some advice about what they could do in these remaining weeks of 2012? You've already gotten a link to a special letter that you can send out. The second strike is healthcare reform. Let your clients know you're working on options. For example, I've written an article published in the Journal of Medical Practice Management about 7 ways to generate revenue outside of insurance billings. You can pass content like this along to your clients and prospects. Reflecting back on this episode that I told you about with my son, I had no control over his developmental course. However, I had complete control over how I responded to it. The response to the circumstances that we face is completely under our control, and you can offer leadership. Next week, we'll begin with the 6-step system, the B2D blueprint. We'll begin with the first step, identifying your target vertical market. Now, I recognize that this is a group of seasoned professionals who've had many years' experience in the physician niche. Have you learned lessons over the years that could lead to refinement of your target vertical market? Over the next week, I invite you to take a look at your client list and try to understand, with whom do you really enjoy working? Thank you again for your participation. We're here to help you. We're here to support you. Feel free to contact us with any comments. Have a wonderful week and look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.